Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Rose Report. Tonight, my guest is Sam Rogers, who's the director of Concerned Vets for America in Wisconsin. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Magdalene.
So I wanted to have you on because you've been highlighting foreign policy on this show and really the battle to reform foreign policy that's going on right now in Congress. So to start off, what is Concerned Vets for America and where did it come from?
So Concerned Vets for America is a public policy organization that seeks to empower veterans, their family members, and communities by helping them share their stories and their experiences to impact the urgent need for crucial policy reforms from everywhere from veterans healthcare reform and accountability of state-run healthcare to the Ending Endless Wars movement, foreign policy reform. And we also would try to address out of control federal spending as a national security issue.
And where does the strategy come from? Is it that you're trying to affect legislation to change people's minds who are politicians, or just to raise awareness?
So one of the things that makes us really unique, and that's really helped us move the needle on a number of these really important issues, is that we kind of do all of those things. We work on educating community members, veterans, service members, their families, on the kind of like nuanced policy wonk stuff that a lot of people just kind of struggle to grasp. And then we connect them to their legislators. We connect them to media. We help them, share their stories, whether it's writing or podcasts or whatever. We follow that stuff up with lobbying on these issues, pushing legislators, and then holding them accountable to the commitments they make to their veteran communities to reform these things.
And where did the need for Concerned Vets come from? Was it that there was one person that was impacted by what was going on, or what is the sort of background to it?
Well, so the organization's been around for about 10 years, and I think has evolved several times as they found that they were able to do more and more impactful things instead of just, engaging in elections or policy research or whatever. Myself, I've been on with Concerned Vets for America for 2 years now. And, what brought me on was accidentally falling down the rabbit hole of policy. 2018, this is well after my third Afghanistan deployment had concluded. In 2018, one of my proteges was killed in Somalia. And talking to his mom, she said, well, we have soldiers in Somalia. And I'm like, yep, I guess. And she said, what are we doing there? And I said, they're killing bad guys. And, she said, oh, okay, who voted for that? Who do I call? Who do I talk to about my son being killed there? And I said, I don't know. I'm going to try to figure it out. And I kind of fell down this rabbit hole of learning about the AUMFs. I was doing a constitutional law program at the time for my undergrad, and it really connected me to this urgent need to reform the way that our military's been really driving its own ship for about the last 20 years. And I think back particularly to my first deployment in the 2009 surge. We had over 40 soldiers killed, close to 350 amputees and serious casualties. And the suicides from the folks on that deployment have continued to this day, a decade later. And so just a massive, the unending impacts, destructive impacts on our communities that a single unit on a single deployment, right? And you multiply that by hundreds or thousands of deployments and units over and over again in perpetuity. And these are hidden but very high costs that we pay for things. And so, one of the other big things is that there's a much larger disconnection between the public and military affairs these days. The New York Times did a study and I think showed that 79% of service members come from military families, which is the largest it's ever been. And so you're seeing this military community that's bearing this burden shrinking smaller and smaller. And I've got a bunch of kids, and my oldest daughter's 11, and I just thinking about if we spent another 10 years in Afghanistan, she could go twice.
Right.
And, and it's just, that was crushing to me. And so, so that's what brought me on to Concerned Vets for America, is that, these are the things that they work on, and they empowered me to build, top and bottom level communities, strategic and tactical communities, to try to share this message and educate people to the core causes of these endless wars, which most people don't understand.
And is there bipartisan support for this lobbying and this education? Because I know there are Democrats, I know there are Republicans who understand that we've been in Afghanistan for over 20 years and there's not really been much payout there. A lot of times people try to phrase it in a very partisan way.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of these movements to end these conflicts have been unsuccessful, is that they focused on the partisan, or they've been unable to find the very important nuanced positions. Like Concerned Vets for America is not anti-military. We're not anti-war. We just we think that this conflict is disconnected constitutionally from the way our system was designed to be run. We think it's extremely expensive. It has catastrophic impacts on our veterans and our veteran communities. It doesn't make us safer. And by exhausting our resources and our best people there, we're actually putting ourselves at greater risk, domestically and abroad. And so those are the positions that we advocate for. And those are things that both parties, when in the minority usually, have explicitly agreed to, right? But I think that right now we're seeing a lot of real hard hand wringing about how quickly Afghanistan's security situation is deteriorating. But if anything, that reinforces that this wasn't working. That trillions of dollars, 20 years, thousands of lives, millions of life-changing disabilities. This, if it, falling apart in a week, demonstrates that it wasn't working and wasn't going to. And these are things we saw in the Afghanistan papers that, these commanding generals and senior politicians have always known, but been unwilling to express publicly and honestly. And that kind of gets to the root of our work on the authorizations for use of military force, which is really kind of like the linchpin of why these conflicts have gone on forever. And that's been the big educational piece we're launching. Well, and right now, obviously, there's bipartisan bills that to eliminate some of those that are gaining steam finally, and we're not just getting Democrats in the minority or Republicans in the minority to vote on them. So, in Wisconsin, for example, Congressman Mike Gallagher, who's traditionally one of the more hawkish folks in the military veterans in the Congress, he sponsored the bill to eliminate the 1991-2002 Iraq AUMFs. So this is something that even the hawks know is a problem. And when we have that kind of consensus, it's really silly to still have these kind of problems going on. So that's where we try to push in. We get community members engaged through, signing petitions that are consistent and shape messaging. We follow those petition deliveries up with lobbying and district meetings. We bring families to meet with their congressmen and women, their senators. And we try to reinforce good behavior when legislators, do something brave and reach across the aisle and try to do the right.
And I noticed on your website discussing the Afghanistan troop withdrawal, one of the things that you can do is you can sign a letter to try to support that as well, to tell politicians to support it. Have you seen, because I noticed on the letter, have you seen people trying to put in conditions or delays in that withdrawal? Because I know that President Biden really wants to meet that goal, but are there behind the scenes or just congressional nonsense going on to condition that withdrawal?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, you see a lot, you see a lot of hand wringing about like, well, this is going to create this vacuum, and that this is going to, terrorists are going to set up shop there again. And I think that we lose. It's been so long. Yeah, I was in high school in 9/11. But it's been so long that people forget that while the planning and training, Al Qaeda was able to set up shop in Afghanistan to run operations around the planet. At the end of the day, 9/11 was a domestic security failure, something that we sacrificed a whole lot of our Fourth Amendment rights and $1 trillion on Homeland Security to supposedly remedy the ability for that to happen again, right? And so when someone says, well, we got to be over there so we don't have to fight them over here, it's kind of ridiculous if you consider the idea that, I was an intelligence officer, a group of terrorists can train, they need like less than an acre to run a little training camp to kill civilians and do all these terrible things. If the idea is that we have to be somewhere else to prevent attacks domestically, then we are essentially saying we should be occupying like the 100-something developing nations on Earth.
Right.
And that's a preposterous assertion, and anyone who would make that publicly would be laughed out of the Congress. But they essentially are tacitly saying that by saying we got to be there all the time. Well, really, you mean we got to be anywhere that's unstable, and at the end of the day, we end up denying Afghans the ability to have self-determination.
Right.
Like they don't know what they want their government to look like, and it's okay if if they don't want it to look like ours,
right?
Because perhaps ours isn't sustainable culturally or conditionally. But while we're there, we suck all the air out of the room. We create this vacuum where all decision making has to happen around this $800 billion gorilla on the kitchen table covered in tanks and missiles and stuff, and people can't shape their own destiny like that.
Right. And I think that that's a good point, especially for younger viewers. Just because our system of government is worked here and is sustainable doesn't mean it would be in another country. And we've seen proof of that now going forward. In the Ending Useless Wars campaign, what does that encompass outside of talking to legislators? How can people get involved on a daily basis, or can they get involved on a daily basis other than just through emailing people?
Yeah, 100%. They can come to cv4a.org. And they can sign up or check out any of our state operations Facebook pages. We do patch through phone calls to legislators when there's votes coming up. We hold events, social events, where we build awareness on these issues and educate folks on them, and really build communities that care about these issues, because at the end of the day, that's where political power comes from. It comes from putting people together who will hold politicians accountable. And that's really one of the biggest things, with these AUMFs. You look at like the 2001 authorization for use of military force. It was passed after 9/11. A third page and it says we're going to punish Al Qaeda and the Taliban for killing all of our civilians, right? And that has been reimagined by men's over and over again, and now encompasses all of planet Earth forever. And the biggest problem is these AUMFs and Congress eschewing their solemn duty to manage the war powers. They've essentially given these responsibilities, constitutional executive branch, which means we maybe have the every 4 years to change, are the ones who are supposed to direct where we go and what we do. And right now they get to have their cake and eat it. They don't have any responsibility. Most of them weren't even in the Congress when they voted for this AUMF. It's like 85% of them are gone. And so, they support our troops, we fund equipment, we go to the funerals, we take the photos, we do all these things. But if somebody says, well, why are we there? They get to agree. We really got to get out of there. We got to wrap that up. But but they've given away that responsibility. And so we want to see AUMFs have a required sunset in the future. That's ending the Afghanistan war is a first big step. Have to reform the broken processes that led to this, and that's what the AUMF reforms are going to be. It's defining it clearly, named enemies, named countries that we're going into conflict with, and every elected official needs to have a by name vote on them, probably every 2 years, because that's the way that the public can influence. We get to decide what is in our national interest, and what is worth sending our children, our brothers or sisters, fathers, mothers, aunts and uncles to die for potentially.
Right.
And if they have to vote for it, you're going to see a lot less war, particularly unnecessary war, because it'll cost too much in political capital for them to continuously vote for things that don't seem to consistently improve security around the world.
Right. And we have seen that sort of emergence of isolationism. It does tend to generate more support, especially I think more youth support. I've known that from my work. And I wanted to know, do you see a lot of youth interest in Concerned Vets America, or a lot of youth interest in reforming foreign policy, at least to try to save money or to try to not have to police the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get a lot of kids of veterans in, who are not military themselves, but they've lived on an Army base or a Marine Corps base at some point.
Right.
They've seen the impacts that this has on the lives of people. And, and it's not to say that we believe in isolationism, right? But we have so many tools to shape and influence outcomes elsewhere. Educational exchange, right? Bringing people to America and showing them, showing them what freedom, what liberty can create, the conditions that can set, right? Economic exchange, free trade, like we have so many tools that can incentivize better quality of life and more stability in countries all around the world that are collaborative and constructive instead of violent and deconstructive. And it's good to have that tool. We need to have that tool, right? But when we've used it the way it's supposed to be, when it's been the absolute last option, I mean, in either world war, is a stellar example of this. When it's the absolute last option on the table, we use our military decisively, successfully, and we don't get tied up in unnecessary conflicts.
And in terms of unnecessary conflicts and applying pressure to politicians, have you seen an uptick in people concerned about either of those issues or concerned about foreign policy? I know several years ago, we had a major upswing in terrorism and a lot of people more interested coming into the 2016 election. Is that happening now, or is foreign policy sort of fall into the background in the COVID fight?
No way. I think it's front and center because, I mean, this was a unity issue during the previous administration, right? And I mean, I think we might have sent 700,000 plus letters to the White House, to congressmen and senators around the country. Like, that's huge. And during the administration change, I think we sent another 300,000 letters to the Biden administration, urging them to follow through with the former president's plan for withdrawal. And I really don't like listening to politicians talk, but I was listening to the Afghanistan withdrawal announcement on NPR, and I had to pull over because, I mean, it was all of the education points that we have been working on for the last 2 years in communities all around the country, on podcasts and radio shows and television. And it was just that works. It works if you commit to it long term and you take actual action, right? Shit posting on Facebook moves zero needles, but like going out to an event and signing a petition and learning how to speak publicly and getting engaged, calling congressmen, helping with phone banks to do that kind of thing. These things worked. And, we have decisively moved this conflict towards ending. And so I think that's the takeaway. And I think people are seeing that, that like, oh, if we actually all kind of get together and we find a nuanced, not toxic, not extremely partisan perspective to take, we can really, I mean, not to say we're saving the world, right? But like we can move things in a good direction and fix some of these issues that for 20 years, everyone's just, it's just the way it is, you know? And I was the old guy in college because I, spent a bunch of years in the Army. And I just remember thinking, like, for some of these folks, this is all they've ever known. And if we don't end this, this will be the normal.
Right.
Forever.
Perpetually at war.
Right. And I found that, we have a huge support from like the Vietnam generation, who have seen this as an even worse perpetuated conflict than the one that they served in.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of differences because this is a all volunteer military as opposed to a drafted military. But I mean, they see parallels there. They've lent their weight into the fight. Groups like the American Legion have been supportive of a lot of these efforts. Folks that traditionally would never get involved in these kinds of things have seen us leading into these opportunities and have helped support getting us across the line. So I hope that this inspires people to get engaged in any of these issues that they care about, that they know are of detriment to our society and our people.
And I think that makes sense. A lot of generations don't want to watch my generation, one before it, go into this cycle of endless wars again. And just sort of in closing, for young people who maybe hear on the TV about an Afghanistan troop withdrawal and hear about how that's affecting Capitol Hill, how does that affect the country as a whole? How does that affect people in their daily lives, the spending of the country? Because it is a massive thing to be happening.
Yeah, I think, I think that it frees up substantial resources that were being expended there. I think it forces our elected officials to reevaluate what it is they're doing and how they do it when it comes to their leadership of foreign affairs, right? The president is not supposed to be the person who, decides where the military goes and what they do outside of their Article 2 authority to defend national interest, right? Like the Congress is supposed to decide these things. And so I think as we close these AUMFs out, you're going to see the Congress, these congressional officials who had no interest in learning anything about what the military does or is or how it works. They're going to have to learn because they are going to have to vote for any of these future conflicts that someone proposes. They're going to have to sign their name on the line. And we've demonstrated now that we know how to hold them accountable, even if they don't want to be.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so the abdication and responsibility of this to the president seems to be dissipating, and that will only allow more people to have an idea of what's going on. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow Concerned Vets for America to get involved or to look at resources for activism?
Yeah, www.cv4a.org is the best place to jump in. It's also where we engage in some of our VA reforms. There's a lot of veterans who have suffered greatly and continue to, despite major reforms that CVA has gotten passed, continue to struggle with government-run healthcare at the VA. Please send people our way. There's a story capture portal there. And we're going to continue to work on these Iraq and Afghanistan AUMFs and keep bringing change. So we need everyone we can get on board. And I think we've demonstrated with the end of this Afghanistan war that we can get these things done.
Yes, definitely. It's certainly a worthwhile cause to decrease our presence in these wars. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Manuel.